So this is going to be on the tripod statement. So we've covered this morning about what we think all the best practices are for developing a prediction model and picking your prediction question. And now we're going to go into what is maybe the slightly less fun, but very important ideas of how you can best report this model, because you can build the best prediction model in the world, but if you don't tell anyone about it, it's not really that good. And so this is a set of guidelines. So we'll cover the basics of good reporting. We'll have a review of the tripod statement. We'll have a little bit of time for you to discuss a paper that we set for your homeworks. It's the CHADS 2 paper. And then what we're going to do is at the end, we'll do this large group summary. What we're going to do this today is we're going to have a quiz. And there is a prize for the person who comes best in this quiz. So I don't know if you guys have seen, but there is a tripod checklist to go through. And we have a version of this on the GitHub link that you've been sent. Now, if you see that there are some highlighted in yellow, I'm not saying that that's definitely useful information for you to have, and you should maybe pay more attention to that. But if you were to do that, I think it could be advantageous to your quiz performance. So let's get going. So requirements for clinical implementation. So we've covered this morning of what we think are the best practices for doing this. But then if you actually want to use these models, what do you have to know as a clinician? So if I'm sat there with a patient, what do I want to know about your prediction model to tell me whether I can use it for my patient? So we say, you've got to be able to, first of all, you've got to be able to identify who this prediction model is for. So if you build a great prediction model for predicting something, but I don't know whether my patient falls into that, then I'm not going to use it. So obviously you need to include this in how you report it. And then also predicting what as well. So if I'm concerned that my patient might have a stroke and you have a prediction model for predicting stroke, but I can't really work this out from your paper, then I'm probably not going to use your model to make this prediction. And then also the time at risk, because this might affect something that I do about the treatment. And then I also want to see the evidence of your performance, because you can make this prediction model, but if you don't tell me whether it's any good or not, I'm also probably not going to use it. And like we had this morning, you want to report both calibration and discrimination. And what we see quite often is that a lot of models reported in the literature do not provide enough information to impact on clinical practice. So whether this is they don't give sufficient definitions of what your target cohort is, or whether they don't give sufficient definitions of the outcome, or they don't tell you the specific setting that you want to be using, or they actually don't tell you how well the model performs. And the way that we can get around this is by looking at this. So I think this paper you should have also have been sent. So this was put together by, I think, 25 plus of the leading experts in clinical prediction in the world. And they came up with a list, so this list of 22 items that they think are essential for you to report your model, and that if you follow this best practice of reporting, then there's not going to be no one's going to say, well, maybe they still don't think your model's any good, but they're going to very much know what your model is about. So what we're going to do now, we have some examples, but I think, so you should have all read this paper. So this is the CHADS 2 paper. So what we want to do as an assignment is you need to go through and basically assign a grade for the paper in each of the checklist boxes. So you should have access, there should be a Word document that you have access to and you can fill this in. So when we think of A, we're saying, yep, this is absolutely perfect. It does everything that it says. This couldn't have been written better. The C is, well, yeah, it does. It covers some of the points that are essential, but not all of them. And then F is, it's just, no, they haven't done it. This is not good enough. So I think we're going to have about 20 minutes now for you guys. So if you can split maybe back into the groups that you were in this morning when you were coming up with your prediction problem, have a discussion together a little bit, and then come up with an answer. Like I said, there is some highlighting that might be useful for you. So definitely focus on that, because it's nice so that means that we'll get a coverage of the whole statement, because you might not have time to go through all 22 points. But do try and have a discussion. Think about what you think is good, whether you think it meets it, the reasons for that and the reasons against that. And then we'll come back. And once we've done that, we will start the quiz. So if you can now get into little groups, and then we can start discussing it. Right, I think we're going to get back started again. So if you haven't finished, don't worry about it. You'll still be able to give an answer to the questions. So what we're going to do now is we have a quiz, and there is a prize for this quiz, which is, actually, I really like it. So you have 10 multiple choice questions. And for every question, you have to say whether you think the paper completely agrees with the statement, or whether the information in the paper completely agrees with what the statement's requirements are, partially fulfills it, or doesn't fulfill it. There's a time limit on these questions, but I should tell you, you get points for the correct answer, obviously, and you also get points for answering the correct answer quickly. So if Jenna, for instance, gave me the correct answer in 1 second, she gets more points than someone who gives the correct answer after 100 seconds. So there is a benefit to your speed. But if you get it wrong, you obviously get no points. So in order to do this, okay, well, basically, what you need, I'll just talk over it. What you need to do is go to the link at the top, so kahoot.it, and then it should give you a little box. So you can do this either on your laptops or on your phone. Yeah, and then so put the pin in, put a name in, and then once everyone's in there, we'll get started on the quiz. So I should say, so once I start, the question will pop up, and then once the question's popped up, you'll have about 10 seconds to read it, think about your answer, and then we'll switch to the next screen, and then you'll have a couple of shapes, and just click the correct answer. And now, obviously, we all know the correct. I should say as well, for the next sort of 10 minutes or so, I am effectively God, because the correct answers are what I think. However, I'm not infallible, so I'm sure that some of you will disagree with me. And what this isn't, so we'll do this, and then once we've got the answers, I'm going to ask someone who picked one of the answers to say why they thought that. And then if someone else has got the other answer, we're going to try and get that and have a little bit of a discussion about what we think. So it's quite, obviously, like, reporting is quite serious, but don't be afraid if you haven't got, or I should say, if you haven't got the correct answer. If you haven't agreed with me, you probably have a very good reason for that, and it's actually interesting to hear that, because a lot of the times when you're looking at how people report it, it is quite subjective, and maybe for you, how they wrote it was completely clear, and for me, less so. But right, so now, if you haven't signed up, then I am afraid it's now too late for you, so we're going to start the quiz. So this should tell you, the first question was, does this identify the study as developing or validating a prediction model, and does it tell you what the target and outcome and time at risk were? So if you see the tripod statement, this is the title, the first one. So does it identify the study as developing, etc. So each of these are going to correspond to, and if you're looking at the document and you see there's some yellow highlighted ones in the document, then you might notice that the questions will correspond to each of those. Got 5 people left, 4. Right. 3 people left to answer, I think. Oh, right, so clearly we've got some disagreement here. So first of all, I thought it was sort of, and I can tell you why later. Look, as someone who thinks that yes, this perfectly agrees with the statement. So we've got 15 people in here, and you were the majority, actually. So if we were like doing some modeling, you'd probably say that you were correct. Why do you think that it agrees? Do you think, but in the paper itself, oh yeah.
It said validating in the title.
And what's the target cohort from the title?
Unknown.
So do you think it correctly identifies?
I retract my
Yep.
Well, I mean, the title does say it's predicting stroke, so it is, the outcome is in the title. But like, I guess it doesn't say that it's, necessarily a predictive model. It's more like a investigation of which of the classification systems will predict stroke best or something to that nature.
Yeah, so this is why I thought it sort of does it, because you read the title and you're like, yeah, I kind of know this. I actually think they do develop a prediction model in this paper. So just saying validate, I think it's useful to say development and validation there. But yeah, if there's anyone who thought no, so they read this title and they had absolutely no idea what this paper was about. Does anyone want to speak up and say why they thought that? Yeah. Okay, right, we'll move on to the next question. So this is the same format. You'll see that there's a limit to how many characters you can put in the questions. But you see that the first section should identify which section of the tripod statement I'm asking you to look at. So, we'll see who's in the lead. So JJ and Cindy are currently joint tied after question 1. I should say the maximum, I think, is 1,000 points available per question. So they were pretty quick off the mark. Yeah, so this is basically, does it sufficiently explain the medical context? Oh, you've all got the hang of it now, because we're all coming in much quicker. Final 2, we've got 34 players, I think. We've got 2 more answers needed. All right, I'm going to give you another 5 seconds. Oh, no, there we go. Right. Oh, this is nice. So lots of people seem to agree with me on this, that they did actually set the medical context pretty well. So does someone who thought they set the medical context well want to say why they thought that?
Just kind of explains what is the problem, what are the schemes used right now, why they needed to construct a new one.
Yeah. Nice. And then someone who said maybe, do they want to just say what they would have liked to have seen also included in this paper? Yeah?
You know about inpatient stay. So all the predictions about hospital stays, but it's not that clear.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. So I think this is one of these things where, again, we come into, I mean, clearly we've got like quite a decent split here, but it is like, are you explicit enough? So I thought they just sort of ticked it across, but then I think, maybe this is me reading it from my like very minimal clinical knowledge. And like a clinician might want a little bit more information, which is also a really useful thing for us to know. But right, let's move on quickly to the next question. So we still got the same top 2, same top 3, I think. Maybe they open out a bit of a, we've got a gap opened up though. So, but right, we'll move on to question 3. So did they correctly describe the eligibility criteria for the participants? Nice. Yeah, well, maybe we're getting the hang of you need a quick answer. I think we seem to have 2 people that really think carefully about their answers, which is nice, but which is probably what we should encourage as scientists, but great. Okay, so this seems pretty clear. People think, yeah, they described it pretty well. So I quite like this, actually. I think actually my mind changed on this one by the last time I gave this quiz. But I think, so people that think either maybe or no, does someone want to say, again, what you would have liked to have seen?
I got a little confused halfway through the paper because at the beginning they say 75 years or older, and then at some point in the paper they get down to 65 or older. So a little bit of like a little confused right there about like what their target population was. They'd done a very good job before then, saying that they were going to do 75 or older, and then all of a sudden, they were talking about 65 or older. So that was a little confusing.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. So that's a really good point. So one of the things I really liked was they gave the specific codes that they were looking for as well. But then I think, if you've got this confusion about age, maybe for the next time I'm going to switch back to somewhat. And then we'll see. So Sujong is doing really well. Question 4. This is, I think, quite self-explanatory. It's a shame I don't get the data on this, actually, because it'd be interesting to see if it's the same 2 people who are thinking carefully about every answer. Right, I'm going to hurry you. So I'm going to give you another 5 seconds. So if that clock hits 60, I'm going to skip. Yeah. So, okay. So again, so it seems like everyone in this room seems to be agreeing with me, which is always quite nice. That maybe I know what I'm talking about, or maybe none of us do. But so again, I'm going to say, so someone who disagreed with the statement, what would you have liked to have seen from the paper? So someone was on. So about a third of the people here were unclear on how the sample size was arrived at. So someone who's from there, what are you missing? No one? Are we just at the point where people are just randomly hitting buttons? Which is what I did with, if you saw the game at the symposium yesterday, I thought the best option was just to go around and spam everyone with treatment. I think I ended up 3rd on the high score list doing that, so. So what I thought, so I like they talked about, so one I sort of missed a little bit was where their initial numbers come from, but then I thought they talked quite carefully about some of the patients that they eliminated, and I thought this was nice, this was sensible. I maybe would have liked to have seen an attrition diagram, because I think, a lot of the times you can miss stuff when you read it in the text, but if you see these nice attrition diagrams, they're really good. But I thought basically the information was there. Maybe it could have been presented a little bit nicer, but otherwise I thought they did, again, a pretty good job. So now we'll move on to...
What if the journal doesn't give you the space to provide the attrition diagram? Would you put it in the supplemental material?
Yeah, I think then definitely have it in the text and put it in the supplemental material as well. Yeah, so actually that's a good point. So there's the best practice for reporting it, and then there's the best practice that you can get into the journal that you want to publish your work as well, which may not be the same thing. Okay, so we're starting to open up a little bit of a lead, but it's still quite close. Question 5. Did they do this properly? Now, I think we can all tell that this is quite an important part of the paper to specify properly. I'm going to give you another 5 seconds now. So we should get moving on a little bit. 1, and that's your lot, unfortunately. Yeah. So again, we've got quite a split here. So can someone who says, yes, they did absolutely everything. So you thought everything was covered, clearly, and then someone who's agreed with me, what do you think was missing from the paper? Yep.
So it doesn't specify how they split the training data and testing data.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point. Actually, that was one of the issues that I had with this paper. So I think it's a little bit older now, but definitely at the end they were reporting AUCs as one of their outputs. And yet I was definitely not sure of what section of the data that AUC was measured on. I think they used all their data for their development, and then they've just reported their sort of training validation. But I was a bit unclear. But then I thought, they said what kind of models they use. They talked about the data a bit, so they definitely covered some of this stuff. But there was, for me, definitely some information that was still missing. So I'm going to move on to the next question. So did they specify all the measures they used to assess? So they told you exactly what they were going to do, and all the metrics they were going to use. Again, I'm going to give you another 5 seconds, because I think we're running a little bit quick on time. 2, 1. Any last answers? No. So again, we've got a split. So someone who agrees with me, what do you think they were missing? Yep.
How do you define chads?
That's the model.
That's the model.
What actually is the model?
No, the chads. That's one of the. Because I mean, then they were trying to define stroke as a function of chads, but I had no idea what the chad was.
Yep. That's a very good point.
Primary input into their model, and I actually did a search on their document, and it comes up a number of 57 times without what the acronym stands for.
Yeah, and I think if it's going in your model, it's probably
So I said no.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, also there's one thing, so we heard about, there were 2 metrics, or 2 things we heard about this morning. So one of them was discrimination, and then the other one, and then can someone tell me what the other one was? And did you see that in the paper? So this is something that actually we see a lot. People love to report their discrimination, particularly when they get high discrimination. And very rarely do you see calibration, despite there being a very large body of evidence that well-calibrated prediction models have a better clinical impact.
They used proc life test, right? So they just did whatever was out of the SAS box. They didn't really do any tuning per se.
Yeah, but they're still making a prediction. And if you're making a prediction, then I want to see your calibration. All right, let's keep going. Oh, we've got change. It's all change at the top. Yeah, did they tell you how many people were in that target, how many people had the event? Yeah, we're running a little bit short, so I'm going to start hurrying you up. So I'm going to give you until the clock hits 1:10. Any last answers? Last chance? All right, too late. Okay, I think this one's pretty clear. People seem to agree with me. Someone who disagreed, do you want to quickly say what was missing? Otherwise, we're going to move on. Last chance? Okay. Question 8. Now, I talked about there was quite an important one of saying what you're going to do. I think if you've got a prediction model, I think this is pretty key to give as your answer. I think if I read a paper and you're reporting a prediction model, and in the end I don't know what goes into your prediction model, then there's something's going to miss. And again, I'm going to give you another 5 seconds from now. So when the clock hits 100, 2, 1, last chance. Right. So why do we think this? So someone who said no. Someone who said no, they don't report their prediction model. Do you want to tell me why you said that? Yep.
I just didn't see the model anywhere. There was a section, I think, where it looked like they were describing what went into it, but it was just unclear to me. So
Yeah.
I guess I'd technically change it to it could be better if you're assuming that what they wrote about was their model. So, I don't know.
Yeah, so I think this is a really good point. So when I read this paper, my first answer to this was like, no, they didn't give me the model, which I think if you're reading a prediction paper should not be the reading that you get. I think, so they end up in one of their tables, they have the prediction model laid out with the score, but they don't ever really, it's not like, I think, if I read this and it's a prediction model, I want you to sort of effectively have the model here in front of me and just repeatedly hit me over the head with it, so I definitely can't miss it, because this is the most important bit. I want to be able to say, hey, I've got your model with however many covariates and the values, and then I want to be able to take this and apply it to my data to see how it performs there, or maybe I want to apply it to the patient who's sat in front of me who wants to know what their risk of this is. Right. Do they explain how to use the prediction model? So again, this is another thing that I think is pretty important, because one of the things we see in a lot of prediction research is that prediction models that work in one context actually really don't work in another. So I want you to tell me the exact context that you want for your prediction model to be used in. And again, I'm going to give you another 5 seconds from now. 4, 3, 2, last chance, absolute last chance. Interesting. So someone who thought they did this a bit. Who thinks they did this a bit? Yep.
I think the paper has some context about how to use the prediction model, because it's a comparison to the other pre-existing two models. So I guess I can call it a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so I think, again, this is where, there's obviously room to disagree here. So for me, when I have this, I want to be very, very specific about this. So I want to know the exact situation. So sort of, basically, I almost want to know the name of the doctor you want to use this and the exact patient that you see in front of them, because I think it's really important with these models to really be very specific in how you want them to be used, because you can see that prediction models get used pretty, I'm not going to say badly, but outside of their context all the time. So I said no. So I think a bit could also be a bit of a correct answer, but for me, nope, because it really just wasn't good enough for me. And then I think we're moving on to the last question. So I think we might know our winner, but maybe there's still, I don't know, we haven't got any runner-up prizes, but maybe we'll find one. So moving on to the last question of the quiz. Do they give an overall interpretation of the results? We're going to be quite quick about this one, so I'm going to give you 10 seconds in order to answer this. So when that clock hits 20, that's going to be the end of the game. Okay, so it's nice actually. People are agreeing with me much more than they did in the last one, so that's quite satisfying. So someone that says yes. You think they did it perfectly? Can you tell me? So what was the overall interpretation that they gave?
So I found the strength of the model and the limitation of the work. So I think that's good enough for me.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think, for me, this comes back a bit to not really explaining the context that well. So this sort of leads on a little bit from the previous question, where I don't really get how they can give me a full interpretation of their results when I don't really know the context that they're going to be using it in. And if I don't know the context they're going to be using it in, it then becomes a little bit difficult for me to understand how well your model will perform. But yeah, so that is the end of the quiz. So let's see who has won. So Norbert.